everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Monday Q&As. So let's get it done. First question. Hey Jason, based on your past experience with martial arts, would you recommend for self-defense? Or what would you recommend for self-defense? Now let me answer another question up front. I get asked this a lot. People always say, oh, you've mentioned you have a martial arts background. Why don't you talk about the details? Will you please talk about the details? And it's just like a lot of my other past. The answer is not just no, but hell no. And my reason being, just because of the nature of my own past, my own background, I tend to think very tactically. And to me, I see no advantage whatsoever since I'm not an instructor. I don't instruct martial arts at all, never have, never will. There is no reason for me to ever go into detail on that stuff. And accordingly, anytime I give out to people out there, I'm a person who gets continual death threats because of my controversial videos. And I do have to think towards the future and towards self-defense. I don't ever let people know publicly what the full extent of my operational capacity is, what the extent of any training I have is, and my fighting ability, because that's giving out free intel that gives people a possible advantage if they do want to attack me. I would much rather have people have no idea at all what my training is and what I'm capable of, and that puts me back in an advantage again in any sort of confrontation. So no, I'm not going to discuss what styles of martial arts I've studied or what sort of training or anything that I have. It puts me at a disadvantage to do so. Now, what I would recommend, if for general defense, if you're attacked out on the street, I would say any style of martial arts is going to put you at least a decent advantage against an untrained attacker. Hands down, any style that you enjoy is better than nothing by a long shot, any training. However, if I had to single one out that someone says, I don't care about what's fun, what I enjoy, what's easily available, what would you recommend would be my best choice, the most diverse choice for handling myself if I'm confronted and attacked on the street for self-defense? I would lean in the direction of jiu-jitsu. Go find you a good Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor, and that would generally be the choice that I would recommend for you guys. All right, next question. Jason, I know sleeping is a big part of building muscle, but how critical is it? I only get around 4 or 5 hours of sleep to do 2 jobs. I also train 5 days a week. Do you think it would make faster or better gains if I got 8 hours? Please answer on the Q&A. Thanks, Jason. Big fan. All right, if your work is putting you in a situation where you have 2 jobs, so you got a higher stress level, and you're not sleeping 8 hours a night, you're only sleeping 4 or 5 hours of sleep, you shouldn't be training 5 days a week. That's just silly. And I sure hope that 5 days a week training is not so that you can work in a split. I have been in a situation to where I worked a lot of hours right before I got sick, actually, where I was drug-free and I was regularly working 5 12-hour shifts. So I would work 12-hour shift Monday through Friday. What I would do is I would come in and train after I worked out, but it was very, very short sessions because I was not on any drugs. I did have a lot of stress from work. I didn't go train for 2 hours. Those were 30 to 45-minute sessions, sometimes less, and I was in and out. It was literally like 3 bench press days a week with some other upper body work thrown in, like my rows, some overhead pressing, in and out, and then I would come in on 2 other days of those week, and I would do as many sets of squats as I felt like doing, sometimes up to 10 sets of squats in 30 minutes and be back out the door, and I would do that on my way home. So it added an hour or less to my trip home each day. Now with you sleeping like that, only way I would recommend you train 5 days a week is if you're running some system to where you're just coming in and doing a few compound exercises, you're in and out in 30 minutes. I might even recommend that you cut that back to 3 full body sessions that are 30 to 45 minutes a week. Be in and out. Training 5 days a week on that type of sleep and 2 jobs is probably not ideal, at least as far as your strength training goes. So no, I don't recommend it. You would be better off trying to get more sleep if possible, and even cutting 2 of those training sessions out with the amount of hours you're working. Cut those 2 training sessions out, cut down to 3, and you can dedicate that time to getting more sleep, which would help you tremendously. All right, next question. At what age do your natural test levels start to drop? I originally intended to be a lifetime drug-free, but I'm actually thinking of jumping on some tests when my natural levels start to drop, just to have them at least on some level as when I was young. What would be appropriate age to start? I'm currently 25. Well, again, I'm not going to necessarily tell you whether you're ready for gear or not. There's a whole host of factors there, and you didn't answer any of the questions that I would normally ask somebody. So I'm not even going to advise that. So let's go back to when your test levels drop. Well, first of all, they drop when you're a teenager. The initial drop, because when you were 16, 17, 18 years old, they're very, very high, then they decline a little bit. But through your early adulthood, they stay pretty stable up until 25, then they start to slowly drop down from that point for the majority of men. And then by 35 to 40, they're generally relatively low. And I recommend, and this is just my opinion, I think most men 35 to 40 and up should be on some sort of testosterone. That's just my opinion, for a whole host of reasons, which I've covered. But they start to drop. But remember, 25 isn't your first drop. You just start seeing, they say stable until then for most men, then you start seeing a gradual decline. But there are a lot of factors involved there. It's not as straightforward as that always. But they dropped as soon as you got out of your teens also, because they were peaked during your teenage years. But a lot of teenagers don't make as much muscle gains as they could make either compared to when they get older. So it goes to show you that your natural test production isn't always as directly related to your muscle gains as you might think. It's only one small factor in the whole equation. It isn't the be-all, end-all by any means. In fact, there have been men with documented low testosterone levels who have made fantastic gains and peaked out to their gains and actually developed a lot of strength and size, and then turned out to find out later they had low testosterone and were still making progress. So it isn't the be-all, end-all. It's only one factor. And most guys who really see declining test levels when they're younger, in my experience, are guys who do lots and lots of cutting. They try to stay at too low a body fat, so they're cutting all the time. That will crash your test levels faster than anything. Cutting too hard and incorrectly. All right, next question. Effects of non-anabolic steroids on athletic performance, such as cortisone. Well, you shouldn't call those non-anabolic. All right, 99% of steroids out there are non-anabolic. All right, the anabolic steroids are a very, 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 very small subsection of steroids that are in the body. They're less than 1%. So put that into perspective. What you mean specifically is corticosteroids, which is cortisone is a corticosteroid. Can they affect your performance? Yes, absolutely. They will negatively impact your recovery to training. Hands down, unequivocally. However, in situations to where you need corticosteroids for a medical reason, not taking them could be detrimental to your health. So if you have a medical issue to where you need them, then you need them. You need to take them if your doctor prescribes it. And if you're worried about your gains, you need to talk to your doctor about that. You get to a point to where what's more important, your gains or your health. And yeah, they will absolutely impact your gains because they slow down recovery. They impact the inflammation processes that you need to help muscle tissue recover, heal, and grow. So they are a negative there, absolutely. All right, next question. Jason, my girlfriend thinks about getting into lifting with me. Should women do barbell or dumbbell bench press? Which is better for a female and why? I would love to hear your take on it. Honestly, just like with men, I generally recommend the barbell movement as a primary exercise. It's a better overall mass and strength builder. Your issue with the barbell for women is, of course, most women starting out are not strong enough to bench press the empty bar. A 20 kilo or a 45 pound bar is too much for them. Unless you have access to a lighter bar, it's going to be very, very difficult. And sometimes you have to have them start with a broomstick. And so for a lot of women, I have historically had them start. Virtually every girl I've ever dated, I got into training in one way or another. So I've always had to have them start with very light dumbbells and build up sometimes 5 pound dumbbells to where they could actually do 5 or 6 reps because they weren't strong enough to do any sort of real weight. But within a month of doing dumbbells, they were strong enough to bench press the empty bar. Then you switch them over to the bar. So it's kind of a complicated answer. It's an issue of relative strength, and a lot of untrained females are not going to be able to bench press an empty bar. A lot of men can't, believe it or not. So most untrained women are not going to be able to do it. So that's your real limiting factor of why you might need to start them on dumbbells anyways, just to develop the strength in those muscles so that they can go to a barbell. All right, next question. How many weeks out from a powerlifting meet would you suggest switching from high bar to low bar squat? All right, assuming you train high bar much of the year and you go to low bar, I would say probably 6 weeks out. Around 6 weeks out, by the 6 week mark, you need to be doing whatever lifts you're going to be doing in competition. So if you've been pulling deficit deadlifts all this time, you need to be pulling normal deadlifts by that point. If you've done any touch and go benching, you need to be cutting that shit out by the 6 week mark and be doing full pause benching. If you're doing high bar squat, but you compete low bar, you need to be going to low bar by about 6 weeks out. You need a good 6 weeks to acclimate and to peak on that specific variation of the exercise. So that's a good standard to use. And definitely, even possibly, if you don't train with a belt, you need to have that belt on. Probably starting around 6 weeks out for most people, depending upon the person. So that's just my general advice. A lot of coaches might disagree with that, and that's okay. It's just my opinion. That's what I recommend, just based upon what you need for an acclimation period for the new lift. Because you're going to need 3 weeks to adapt to it and then another 3 weeks to peak it. All right, next question. On your intermediate program, do you recommend doing 3x10, 4x10, and 5x10, etc. on both the squat and deadlift? It seems like a very large amount of volume. Well, it is a large amount of volume once you're at an intermediate strength level, but you're only doing those for a 1 week block each. So keep that in mind. That's you're only doing 2 workouts. That's only, basically, that's 3 weeks really, and you're doing 2 workouts with each. It's only 6 training sessions to where you're doing that, and then you're upping intensity and cutting volume back. It's fine, because what you're going to find with that is that it progresses. It gets harder, then it gets easier for 1 week. It gets harder for 3 weeks, gets easier for a week as the intensity goes up, and then the total volume goes down. And it works just fine. Yeah, if you, by that 3rd week, that gets really, really difficult. It is a lot of volume. You are struggling from the metabolic fatigue. But that's the whole point. You're struggling, and that's going to induce adaptation, and then you switch over to the next block in the periodization, and it's perfectly fine. And again, you've got to keep in mind, this is relative workloads. You're not using that heavy of a weight for those sets of 10. But that block is intended, that 3 week block is intended to maximize metabolic fatigue. And so yes, it's going to be hard. You are going to get fatigued metabolically. That is the whole idea. And if that seems too difficult to people, that lets you know why you haven't been making gains in the past. If you go to do that and you realize, wow, this is really, really hard and I'm struggling, that's why you haven't made the gains that you wanted up until now. You haven't been training that hard. All right, next question, and this is the last question of the week, and this is off topic a bit. Jason, what is your take on gun control in the U.S.? I got to sum this up. This is something I've discussed. I get into political chats a lot on my private Facebook. I have very mixed views on guns, and again, it's interesting because I do understand and grasp some of the left-wing policies here. I grew up in Texas. I have a very gun-oriented background. I started shooting at age 6 with target rifles. I did competitive shooting up through my teenage years in 1,000-yard competition. I have owned probably 30 to 40 firearms in my life. I have registered with the FBI in my name. I have 7 different assault weapons registered with them under my name right now, even inside the United States. So I have had a lot of guns. I have a lot of, it's my entire life history up until moving to the UK has involved guns. I do support the right to own firearms. The concern you have in the US is how do you keep this level of firepower out of the hands of the criminals, which is a real problem. We can't just take the guns away from Americans at this point because of the amount of armament that criminals have. What I always tell people, the things that I support, the first one, the other gun rights advocates get really mad at me when I say this. They get absurdly angry, tell me I have no right to this opinion, but this is my opinion. And I think it strikes a fine balance between trusting the state versus the state trusting the citizens. I do believe in putting RFID chips in guns, and I believe that owning one that has a chip and being found where the chip has been disabled should carry a criminal penalty unless you get proof that you didn't tamper with it in any way, and then they put a new one in, so that they can track firearms. And the reason for this is how you keep them, get them out of the hands of criminals to some extent. And people could argue, yeah, there could be a whole market set up to removing those chips. That's true, but the average street level criminal, that's only organized crime. The average street level criminal is a fucking dumbass. The average drug dealer and gang leaders in local drug gangs are dumbasses. They're not going to figure out how to do this. If you install them correctly, put them inside the metal, put them in an area to where it will disable something like the receiver on an AR-15 if you try to drill it out, to where it will damage the functionability of the weapon. This can be done very easily by engineers. Put RFID chips, they can be tracked. Now, a lot of people don't like that, but then my counter argument is allow open carry across the United States. Full open carry by anyone with no criminal background. Anyone who's got a clean criminal background should be allowed to carry an AR-15 or a .45 ACP in a holster down the street as long as they're not locked and cocked. Let them have a magazine, not one in the chamber. I fully support that right. I also support the right of a business to say, no, we don't want you to bring your open carry gun into our business. They're forbidden, and if you take it in there, it's a crime. They'll have a sign posted up, you can't do it. That will deter crime a lot because then everyone's got weaponry. Criminals are going to see it. They're going to realize the stakes are higher. And increase the penalties for organized criminals who have guns. Stop giving them little slap on the hand sentences. If someone is a drug dealer and they're caught with an AR-15, give them life in prison or the goddamn death penalty. Problem solved. And I don't believe, and this is the one that gets people also, I don't believe in the rights of the citizens to own guns to overthrow the government because it simply isn't necessary. When it comes down to push comes to shove, say in a country like the United States, the government and the military technologically outpower the average citizen so much that 1,000 men with assault rifles isn't that difficult to take out. And look what happens when we go into the Middle East right now and fight insurgencies that have the kind of firepower that the average citizen or these people who want to have guns in order to fight against the government would have. We wipe them out. We kill them 100 to 1. Put that into perspective. Do you really think that's going to work? It's not. What you would see in a popular revolution in the United States, you would see a very large segment of the military step away and fight back and fight with the people. The military will arm people. They will build insurgencies. All you would really need in each region is one Green Beret, for example, to turn and decide that the government is no longer government of the people. It's broke its contract with the people. They fall back. They build insurgencies. They train those insurgencies on how to take weaponry and acquire weaponry in ambushes and raids from the real military, how to hit military convoys with minimal losses to them and get armaments and arm them. They would arm themselves off the military very, very quickly. They wouldn't need weaker civilian level firepower to any large extent to do that in a true popular revolution. All they would need is a certain segment of the military to step back and help them. You don't need large amounts of firepower in civilian hands to make something like that work. You really don't. And history has proven that over and over. Our own government and military is set up in such a way to make that possible in a true popular revolution. You'd be surprised. It would work without the civilians owning much firepower at all. It would still be successful if that was ever decided. So no, I don't really believe in that aspect of it any longer. That world has changed since that document was written. So that's just my opinion on it. And I could go into a lot more complex detail, but it'd be a really long video breaking down why I have those different views on those points. Alright guys, well that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative. And I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh, Mount Biceps.